Welcome to Desert Well, a place where we gather like travelers, finding refreshment and community around life's most essential source. Throughout history, wells have been places where people pause their journey, places where they share stories and find the sustenance they need to continue on. But we're here because we've discovered something even better. Jesus promised that whoever drinks from the water he gives will never thirst again. That living water doesn't just satisfy, it becomes a spring welling up to eternal life. So whether you're navigating the challenges of family life, wrestling with questions of faith, or simply trying to live faithfully in a complicated world, we invite you to pull up a chair around this well. Here, we'll explore how God's unchanging word speaks into our everyday experiences, offering wisdom, hope, and the kind of refreshment that truly lasts. This is Desert Well, where life's conversations meet living water.
Welcome back to the Desert Well podcast, where we gather around the well that is Jesus, both to drink deeply from his good news for you, for the world, but also just to be a part of the conversation. So we're glad that you're here wherever it is and whenever it is you have decided and chosen to be here. And we hope, too, that as you listen, you might feel and experience that good news that Jesus brings. So today we are talking about, call it purpose, call it planning, call it a follow-up conversation maybe to the voters meeting that happened just this past Sunday on January 25th. So by now, we're recording before that happens, so assuming that I don't drop dead and assuming that Jesus doesn't return, and barring any other extreme circumstances, you will have heard about our commitment as a board of directors and myself to engage in some sort of strategic planning in the year 2026. And I will have talked a little bit there about why that is, but after our board meeting, I shared the outline there. Derek and I just thought it would be a good idea to kind of run through a little bit more of that conversation that I had and maybe explain some more of the details and just talk a little bit more about planning and all those sort of things. But
yeah, because this is
first, I think
it's
we
not
should
just for the
go
church
ahead.
either, right? It's for the schools as well. So it's
Right.
it impacts everybody in our community. Not in like a negative way, right? Strategic planning is supposed to be a good thing. So we're excited about the process and getting started with that because of what it can do for us as an organization as a whole.
Right, exactly. It's not just the church, right? We are one family, church and school together. And so this is hey, we're going to have some conversations together as an organization about the future, all of those sort of things. So I'd first be curious, Derek, if you've ever done anything like this before, and then if not, then perhaps what do you think most people hear or think about when they hear the words and phrases, we're doing strategic planning?
I've done a little bit of it, right? Nothing maybe formalized like what we're looking at doing. But typically, I would say that most people would think, well, you're trying to kind of map out your future, or at least what it might look like. But I think it's diving into, who we are, how we operate, from top down, like what are the things that we're doing well, what things do we need to do better at, so that when we do try to map out and kind of plan for the future, that we have a much better understanding of where we're going and why we're going there, right? So it can kind of shape our future together and kind of give us all a roadmap for where we are going together.
Absolutely. And I think it's a helpful way to think about why, or it's important to ask the question why. And so one of the things that I would put before us is to always return to that sort of thing. So one of the things I shared at the voters meeting, and we can talk, kind of interrupt me whenever you think we need to go somewhere else, but is the difference between viability and opportunity. And again, this is per my conversation with a guy named Jim Henkel, who is the ministry executive of the Pacific Southwest District. Maybe we'll get him on the podcast sometime in the future. They just started one, like you said, before we started recording at the Pacific Southwest District. But we're sitting there talking with him, and he talked about, well, what's the difference between viability and opportunity? Because most often when we have these conversations about improvements or changes, usually they're centered around the viability sort of things. It's keeping the doors open. It's making sure that our place looks beautiful, that other people might want to be here and see it and participate in what's going on. It's making sure that we're putting our name out there so people don't say, oh, what's Lamb of God Lutheran School? I've never heard of that before. It's making sure that our teachers are being trained and equipped. It's making sure, I mean, the list could go on and on. And so those are all viability. Those are all just good things organizationally, business-wise to do. And in some ways, we don't need to be taught or we don't need to be pushed to think about those things, that those are the things that happen naturally.
Yep.
And the question that he said is why? Why do you want your church to be open, right? Why do you want your sanctuary to be beautiful? Why do you want to make sure that kids know what your school is? And what's so powerful about that is it really takes what's a surface level question about some improvement or some change you think you need to make. So you could even throw into this bucket, well, I think we need to have a young singles group. Well, why? Right? You could ask that question too. And so it takes all of these sort of things that we just, these statements of truth, these statements of change, or these statements of what should be or could be, and it adds a level of deeper thought, deeper motivation. Why do you want this thing, or why do you want to do that thing?
Yeah.
And usually,
I was just going to say, it's I think we operate more out of a fear oftentimes with this, right?
Say more.
When we are looking at the opportunities that are in front of us, that oftentimes I'm going to use more of like an investment analogy here, right? So, not saying that viability is just about money, right? There's a lot of different things here. So disclaimer there. But I look at this like viability versus opportunity, kind of like an investment risk assessment, right? To where if you're just worried about the viability of something, right, that's playing things very conservative. But if you're just jumping at every opportunity that comes up, that's being very aggressive, right? And so there's some risk assessment in each of those options, right? If you play it conservatively, you might miss out on opportunities for growth. If you play it too aggressive, you might make some decisions that may not be the best, right? So I think that there's I don't know, I'm a happy medium guy all the time, right? I guess I'm always aiming right down the middle for things.
You really should have been a politician, Derek.
No.
I'm not going to say anything else.
And so that's how I kind of look at this, right? When opportunities are presented, or at least available, it's definitely something that you need to look at on all standpoints, right? And make decisions there. But I think that we need to look at it from an opportunity of, well, how can we reach more people? How can we continue to spread the gospel to the people in our community? How can we continue to to be the light in the darkness in our area? So the analogy of the investment risk assessment, I guess, fits more with the financial side of it, but also, like, are we willing to take chances and do things maybe a little bit differently or a little bit new to go out and meet people and to teach them about Jesus? So I love that he brought these two things up to you, because it kind of paints that picture, at least for me, of where do our thoughts go immediately when we think about, strategic planning or just planning in general? And I think that question of why are we doing this or that or whatever it is, um, that's the important question of, well, why are we taking this opportunity, or why are we making a decision to not take the opportunity, is, I think, a really good question too. But what is important about it? Are we doing it because we want to teach others, and reach others that are beyond our community or within our community? Um, so yeah, I like this viability versus opportunity like analogy.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, we dive even further, I think, push that financial example even more and ask the question, well, why would you even do a risk assessment? Right. And so, well, if you're doing what you might think of as conservative things, well, why are you doing
Mhm.
it that way? If you're not and you're going out there doing it, why are you doing it that way? Why are you pursuing this or why are you pursuing that? And I think all of those things would get down to some sort of, call it, heart reason or a core identity thing on a, this is what I believe about the world, and thus this is what I believe about myself. And that applies to obviously your money, how you spend it, how you save it, but also applies to what you do with your time
Yep.
and what you choose to focus on as an organization as well. And so again, it's why do you, I mean, the most basic question, why do you even have worship services? What's the point? Why do you have more than one? Why do you have them on that particular day? I mean, the list of why questions are almost endless, but I think we don't really stop and ask why. So, I mean, I try and lead with why, right? That's a Simon Sinek phrase. Start with why, always begin with why. And I try to begin with why because most often people are much more receptive, and myself included. If you just tell me, hey, we're doing this thing, my first question is probably going to be
Why?
why, but then no, we're not. That's not what's going to happen. Whether it's my kids or somebody else, hey, daddy, I want this thing. Usually my first question is why, or, why do you want to do that? And so if we start with why, it helps people understand what's happening and why things are going on, what things are, what the goal of things are, even, if you will. And so viability projects, don't hear me wrong, we need to do those things. We should do those things. Some churches need to be told that you should care about how your sanctuary looks, and you should care about the assimilation process, or the how do guests feel when they come to your place. Are they welcome? You should care about the process of driving into your campus and what it's like to park and to walk. Do you have to guess where the entryway is? Do you have to walk over a mountain to get there? Are there people, all of these things matter. But I would say, and I think Jim would say, all of those are just, call them almost quality of life,
Mhm.
or almost the entry ticket into something more. And so that something more is the opportunities. And in many ways, I wonder if sometimes we miss out on the opportunities. And the image that comes to mind for me is, again, and I ascribe all of these things to myself just as much as anyone else, that the urgent tyranny of whatever pressing thing is happening, we walk around with our heads down like this. Yes, isn't my bald head so beautiful? And we walk around with our heads down like this. If you can't see, I'm looking at the ground. And this is kind of how we live life as individuals and as an organization, that what we see is our 2 feet. So we think first about ourselves. But if we see something else, we most certainly don't see what's happening in the future. And if anything, we see what's coming at us right now.
Yep.
And so we don't make the space, we don't spend the time, we don't even consider what could be in the future. And so a great a great example of this, I've been talking to strategic planners, the most recent one I talked to, the process that she uses is what's called a vision frame. And what you end up with is like this picture. It's a frame, and there's different layers in your picture, your image that you're working with, and they're all related to different times. And so just like you're driving on a road, if you're driving on 215 going west on the northern part, like towards Mount Charleston, right? You've got Centennial Hills there first. And then if you maybe go north on the 95 or the 11, whatever it is, and you hit, the with the Kyle Canyon. So then you can go, then that's a little bit further. Then you've got Mount Charleston there, right? That's way in the background there. It's sort of the time and the length of those things. But because we walk around like this, all we can really see is what's right in front of us, maybe a little bit more out into the future. And so the opportunity to even think about opportunities, which is a fun sentence, doesn't happen naturally to us. And so we need to call it forced. That might make people uncomfortable. Call it invited, right? We need to be invited into a safe space to consider what are the opportunities. Because in some ways, I'll say this and then I'll throw it to you. In some ways, if all we ever think about are viability projects, then what we're doing is we're just kind of spinning our wheels, and we're making sure our wheels are nice and oiled and greased and our car is running, but we're not really going anywhere. We're not really accomplishing any purpose in those things. And might people be here? Absolutely. Might people come and say, what a great place? Absolutely. But we're missing out on the opportunity to put that car in a drive and to take it somewhere, to go to some sort of journey destination and be a part of what God is doing into the future in a different place. So viability, opportunity.
Yeah. And I'll just say one thing about the tyranny of the urgent, right? Like that's true for I think everybody, that oftentimes, and this is something that one of my mentors, when I became the principal here, he would always tell me, don't get stuck in the tyranny of urgent, because there's going to be a bunch of things that seem urgent right now that you have to take care of. But there are very few things that you really have to immediately take care of, right? Of course there are. But he just said, you're going to lose sight of other opportunities if you let that happen too much or too often. So no, I love that analogy, because I think it's good for us to picture that, with strategic planning and why we're doing it, so that we can purposefully get out of that kind of mindset, right? Or that framework. So yeah. All right, let's go to outreach versus witness. Tell us a little bit about this one.
Absolutely. So when we usually think about strategic planning in the future, the call of Jesus for the church is largely the same throughout generations, right? This is Matthew 28 stuff, that it doesn't matter what place you live in. It doesn't matter what generation you are a part of. It doesn't matter any of that stuff. The call is still the same of Jesus, to go into all the world, to make disciples, to baptize them, and to teach them all the things that Jesus has said, and to assure them that he's with them, just like he promised, until the very end of the age. And so that call is the same. And usually when we think about outreach, when we think about witness, when we think about planning, there's going to be some sort of part of it that says, hey, we need to go tell people about Jesus. And usually we use these words, again, this is Jim talking through me, if not, maybe not that strongly, but his ideas, that we use two different words to define these things. Usually we talk about outreach events, and you call them witnessing, or just witnessing in general. And he said, though, which I think is very helpful, I never heard this before, there's a difference between two outreach events. So they're not all the same. It's been very helpful for me. I've shared this a few times already. So when we think about outreach, as you'll hear on the voters meeting, if you're there, outreach events are twofold. First, they're get to know you events. And so this is the big come one, come all. This is the come see our place, right? It is simply to get people here. And so in some ways, I would say this is what VBS is for, a get to know you event. Sure, we might get to know the kids a little bit, but more it's like, hey, I went to that church for VBS. It was fun. Hey, I went to trunk or treat at that church. I got lots of candy. Hey, the Marshes do a great job here having get to know you type events for our school families. Yep. Like, come into our building, come into the fellowship hall. Hey, we're here. Look, we're smiley. We're not evil people. We're just here to say hello. It's a get to know you event. And what he said, which I think is very true, is that some people might be tempted to say, oh, we're doing these because we want people to come to worship. And I think the heart behind that is very pure and very good, right? We want all people to be in worship, not because of the numbers, not because of our attendance records, but because we want them to be where God promises to show up to give them what they need in life, because there are so many people who are thirsting, who need what only they can find in worship. That's why we want people there. But what he said is that those events will not bring people into worship. And that makes sense, right? You don't go to, so in October, we went to the pumpkin thing, the Halloween town or something like that, in Centennial area. That's a fun thing. You should go next year with Mackley.
We did. We took them there like one afternoon and got a couple pumpkins. That was that's where we got the pumpkin that we put them in. Yeah.
There you go. So we went there, right? And it was a fun event.
Yep.
Like, I paid for it. I went there. It was a great time. My kids love to ride the rides, but I didn't say, oh, I would like to become a carny person, right? I want to travel around the world and do this sort of event, right? It was hey, this was a fun thing. And then I went home. And in the same way, people come to these get to know you events and they say, oh, that was fun. These are nice people.
Yeah. Thanks for hosting.
Thank you for hosting us. What a great thing that you do for us. And those are important, right? Because if nobody knows we're here, like I said earlier, if nobody knows Lamb of God School exists, that's a problem. In the same way, if nobody knows that Lamb of God Church is here, also a problem. But that's not the only type of outreach event there is. Anything you want to say before I go to the next one?
Just that, to reiterate that, they are very important events that we still do, and we do them because we want people to have that connection with us too. But we also have to keep in mind that hosting more and more and more of those types of events isn't going to probably meet the goal that we really want them to, right? And that's where this next part becomes important, and I'll let you kind of take it away there. But the outreach events, they're fun, they're exciting, we love hosting them. We're thankful for the Marshes for hosting those events for our school families, and I know that the school families that use those days to drop their kids off and go shopping, drop their kids off and just go have some peace and quiet for a couple hours, right? Like, that's a wonderful thing for our community. And so those types of events are very important. But now tell us the difference between what this next one is with the witness, and how is that different than the outreach thing that we just talked about?
Sure. So there's actually a different type of outreach event before we get to witness. And that would be a reoccurring relational event. And so a great example of this in our church and our family faith here is our Prime Timers group.
Yep.
And so this is a group for people who are 55 plus. And yes, they pray, sure, but there's no obligation to participate in like a Bible study. They're not going to sit around and ask them, hey, tell me how much you know about what 1 Corinthians chapter 1 says. It's purely a relational event for people to be with each other that you don't have to be a member to come to. Now, is it predominantly members right now? Sure. I still long and pray for the day when it's so big we need to, fill our sanctuary with people of that demographic who needs community. And so it's a great example of that. Another good example of this, I did these services when I was a vicar at Emmanuel Lutheran in St. Charles. This was my job, to go around to the different nursing homes where we had members, different facilities, and I would do a worship service there for those people that were members. But then do you know what happened? people that were not members of our church came, right? And so then, well, now I'm forming relationships with these people that I would never see on a Sunday morning because they're here.
Yep.
And that I would never really come into relationship with except for an outreach event in this facility. And so again, it's an ongoing thing where I could bring one of the lay ministers, I could bring somebody else along with me, and then now suddenly there's more than one of us engaging in a relationship, and oh look, hey, maybe next time that person's son or daughter is there, and now I know them too, and then they know me as that person who cares about their mom and dad, and that, oh, they're going through a hard time too, and so they shared with me what's going on, and I'm able to pray for them and have that ongoing relationship with them. So I think when you say it in that way, it clicks for people.
Yep.
But until you have it explained to you in that way, because it was me, I never heard this distinction, but now that I've heard it, I don't think I'll ever see it, unhear it. And it just makes sense to say, oh, some are just get to know you, some are ongoing relational opportunities for you to engage with people and call it life on life discipleship that actually has the possibility to bring people into a deeper place of faith and maybe perhaps a part of your worshiping community. So, should we talk about witness now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this one is fairly explanatory, right? Self-explanatory. But yeah. So I'll tell this story because you brought it up the other night in the board of director meeting anyways.
Sure. Go ahead.
So one of our board member was talking about how one of their favorite things to do is to have a t-shirt that said something, and was talking about how he was going to buy a shirt that said, "How can I pray for you?" Right. And so you brought up that is a perfect example of a witness event, right? To where somebody might be able to come up to you and you can pray for them, you can talk to them, you can share your story, right? Tie in our theme a little bit. And so there are a lot of witness opportunities. And so that for me, when you pointed that out in the board of directors meeting, I was like, oh yeah, that's really cool. So maybe I should talk about this, maybe not. One thing that you might see
Sure, go
with
ahead.
our staff, so we just talked about this today, is Luke 2. It's a local organization here in town. I just talked with them. They have a Luke 24, which is the Easter story. So if you see us walking around with like different shirts on, right, that's like another example of a witness thing.
Right, exactly. And it's not, I mean, this comes back to the theme of the year, Redeemed to Tell. It comes back to the sermon series we did a long time ago, feels like now, on telling your story, telling your God story, and how it's not this like crazy, scary thing, right? To witness is not to say, hey, I've got my testimony ready and prepared. I know it's approximately 500 words and about 4.5 minutes long, and that if I go fast, I can probably get it in 3. That's not what that means. Is that part of it? Sure. We need to know, just like Peter says, to be prepared to give a testimony to the witness, to the hope that is within us. But witnessing also looks like you said, right? Wearing a t-shirt can be witnessing, right? Stopping to actually pray for someone. It's amazing. People, again, I pray for a lot of people, but I always need to remind myself when I find out about something that someone's, hey, my uncle died. Hey, this thing has happened to me. It's one thing to say, oh, we'll pray for you, but it's another thing to do it in the moment and to actually stop and pray right then, wherever you are, right? Poor Pam, I think probably, is like, oh, well, there he goes again, praying in front of my office door. But, that's where I interact with people a lot, is right out there in the main entryway. And I will stop and pray for people right there if I need to, because that's where and how those things happen. But you can do that in your neighborhood, right? You can do it on the golf course. You can do it on the thing. If you're, hey, can I say a quick prayer for you? Jesus, help this person. Amen. That's good.
Yep.
Right? That's a good prayer. It's simple. It's short. It's real, and it's a blessing to that person. So witnessing in the broad sense, but also in just the very easy sense of taking a moment to talk about Jesus, talk about faith with that person. So I think the question I asked for you, and then we'll talk about this next one, is what do you think? How do you know when a church, a school, an organization is ready for something like this?
think I know where you want me to go with this, but I don't know if that's would be
No,
my
I
first
mean,
answer or
you
not.
tell me your answer. I mean, what do you think? I mean, obviously, you know what I said in our meeting. So, what do you think would be people's first reaction then?
Well, I think there's two initial thoughts. Um, the first one is you don't have any other choice; you have to do it, because if you don't, then
Mm,
you yeah,
necessity.
right.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
the other one is uh, like, we want to do this because we want to know where we're going, right? And
So
so
like it comes from within, bubbles up from the ground, sort of thing,
yeah, I think
grassroots.
that like, right there's those two tracks. Like, you don't have any other choice, because if you don't do it, like, you're not going to be around, right? So more like the
Sure.
viability thing that we were talking about. Um, so maybe it goes right back to the first thing that we talked about, the viability versus opportunity, right? Uh, because I think that the other side of it is, like, we want to continue to do better and better all the time, and we can make these small decisions that do allow us to improve, but that doesn't get us to the bigger goal of where we can go, right? um, and so I think that's kind of how, at least the first two things that came to my mind was, um, when I hear strategic planning, it's like, okay, well, why are you doing it, right? There's that why question again. Well, either because you have
Hmm.
to, or because you see the value in doing it, because it's going to help you in the long term and the short term too.
Right. And so the thing that I'm sensitive to here is that, like any other church, right, there's been pain and difficulty and challenge in the past with different things, and I'm sensitive to those things because the church is the people, right? The people are the church. The building, the campus is not the church. You people are the church. And so we, as people who are sinful and broken, who live in a sinful and broken world, are often hurt and wounded in those things. And so in some ways, we want to make sure that as we talk about these big of questions, right? This is not a small thing to say, hey, who are we? Right? That is not a small question. To say, where are we going, is not an easy question, and is a huge undertaking to think about, even to even have the mindset or the ability to entertain the question is a huge thing. And so the thing that he said to me, because I was expressing to him, I would call it my fears,
Mhm.
because I think I can say I love the people here, and I want them to come along with us, and I don't want to lose people. But at the same time, I'm not ignorant. I know that that happens, right? I know that there have already been people who have left since I've been here, that in the future there will be people who will leave because of something I do or say. I'm not ignorant to that. But I do want to, I'm a peacemaker at heart, and so I do want to bring as many people as I can. And so the thing that I think you could be led to think or say is, well, if that's the truth, then what you need to do is you need to make sure that you can wait until everyone is ready. That you can wait until every person says, yup, now is the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Derek, but when I sit around and wait for the right time, that time never comes.
Yeah. There's never a perfect
Right.
time for
So,
anything, right?
right. There's never a perfect time for anything. There will always be a reason or an excuse to wait, a reason or excuse to hold off, a reason or excuse to go a different way.
Yep.
And so, what he said to me, he framed it in the concept of relationship, which, again, one of those, duh, makes sense. How come I didn't think about it in this way? Because what is required in a process like this is not necessarily knowledge. Sure, we need an outside person to come help us and facilitate conversations and walk us through a process, but they're not coming in and saying, hey, here's the 4 things I think you need to do because of this reason. Okay, do this. Thanks for your money. Goodbye. No, they're here to help us discover, walk through something together. And what's needed in that is trust.
Yep.
It's trust that I am not here to impose my will on you, right? This is one of the first newsletters I wrote. What do you want, Pastor? What do you want, Pastor? What do you want, Pastor? And no one's really asked me that lately. And or at least you should see their eyes now when I say, well, what do you think? Because people just know, I think, to expect that question back from me, because I'm not just going to say, well, this is what I think we should do, because it's a we here, as I've said, and as I will continue to say. And so the question he said is, it's not, is the timing right, but is the relationship right?
Sure. Yeah.
And sure, as we record this, we're not fully on a whole year yet. We're not fully into that whole year. And I think that sort of relationship, that trust, will just continue to build in this process. But it feels like it's at a point when our relationship, and by our relationship, it's sort of weird, I'm talking in the third person. I feel like me with people, which in some ways is even somewhat twisted. Like, does it really revolve around me? No, absolutely not. As I've said, we're in this together. But I think when we think about strategic planning for the future, many people would associate that with the pastor, whoever is in that chair. And so then the question becomes, well, do the people and is the relationship ready for you to go on a process together, to go on a walk together? Because the phrase is true, right? You want to go fast, you can go alone.
Yep.
But if you want to go far, you can go together. And so whether I'm wrong, I hope not, but I have the sense that as we go on this together, we're going to walk. The image in my head is walking side by side, and that it's not going to happen that I'm going to walk out in front and then I'm going to go like this and go, oh, where is everyone? Right? That we're going to go on this journey together. We're going to walk together and say, look at this thing, look at that thing. What are the viability things that we maybe do need to think about? But ultimately, where are the opportunities God is calling us to? And I am so excited for this. Like it's
going to be
it
fun.
lights a fire in my bones.
And
absolutely.
Super awesome to see just what comes out of this process. And I want to touch on like something that you said and you reiterated a couple times here, but I like to think about it this way, that like the strategic planning, the purpose behind that and bringing somebody in too is because it's not just a you idea, it's not just a me idea, it's not just Nicole idea, it's not just a teacher idea, it's not just a church member idea, right? That it's because I have an idea of what I would love to see this place be, right? But that might not be the right idea. You might have an idea, but again, it's focused on one person. Whereas when we come together with strategic planning, right, we can kind of take elements of all of that, and that's where we get this beautiful picture and beautiful idea of what is Lamb of God going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, right? And how can we work together to get there, based on all of our ideas and based on this process. I'm super excited for it. It's been something that I've been anxious for a while.
Right. So we don't have any timeline yet per se of when this is going to happen, but we felt like this would be a good conversation follow-up to what we talked about in the voters meeting. So now somehow I need to boil all of those things down to an appropriate level of time. We just spent 38 minutes. So hopefully I can do it in 10 or 15 or so. But
you take as long
nevertheless, we would love to hear what you think. How does this help you see planning in maybe a different way? Maybe see some of the relational sides of it, right? That because ultimately God is at work through these things, right?
Absolutely.
If we're talking about gathering around the well, that is Jesus for the good news. That, there's a book that I was reading on planning called Holy Conversations. And the reason the authors call it that is because they believe God works through the conversations that take place in planning to guide, direct, to move, to point, to reveal, whatever word you want to put in there. And that that's the thing that makes planning special and holy and awesome, because it's not, in some ways, the outcome matters, right? That's very important because it's going to help us go into the future. But in a lot of ways, too, it's the process itself that is so important, because it binds people together. It binds the congregation and the school and all of us as an organization for one singular purpose into the future. And so it's just a beautiful thing to be able to dream of participating in, and a beautiful thing that how God works through his people for the sake of the world. Anything else you want to add today?
No, I don't think so. I think that there's a lot of fun, exciting things coming. So I'm excited personally.
There's a lot of fun things coming, exciting things coming. So I'm excited. I love it.
It's, I mean, you and I, we've talked about it a lot, right? So it's something that I've been kind of anxious for. So I'm ready to go.
Absolutely. So we're excited for that. Thanks for being with us this week. Again, we'd love to hear what you think we should talk about. I told Derek the other day, I'll voice this here and see what people say in person. So I'm considering us going through a monthly news podcast. So maybe we each bring a couple of news stories from the week, or current events, if you will, and talk about them through the lens of Jesus, for this reason, that in our world today, we are bombarded with news and in current events and interpretations of current events. And that news, whatever channel you like to listen to, whatever feed you like to watch, does not primarily see things through the lens of Jesus. And so we need to think about things as followers of Jesus. And so it would be a thing where we would be looking at all sorts of nuances. It would probably make you angry. That I told you, Derek, this today, that if we did this, I'm going to try and make as many people angry as I can, because if you really look at things through the lens of Jesus, nothing is as ever simple as you see on the headlines, as you see on whatever thing you're watching, whatever screen it is that you're consuming. And I think that's good, because it's good for us to see the world as Jesus saw it, worthy of his redemption, his love, all those sort of things. So maybe we'll do that. It seems like it might require a lot of courage from me and Derek. So I don't know if I'm willing to die on any of those altars yet, but nevertheless, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about that. We will see you, though, next week as we gather around the well that is Jesus, both to drink deeply from his gospel good news for you, for the world, but also to be a part of the conversation. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.